We're here to interview today about the Wheelersburg tornado in 1968. And I will start by asking your names.
Clyde Willis,
Sandy Willis,
Okay. Your age or date of birth.
1839.
and mine is November 9th, 1942.
Okay. And you're married
Yes.
to each other.
Yes. And we were back then.
That's very good. And what was your maiden name?
Purcell,
Purcell. Okay. How long have you lived in this area, Wheelersburg?
75 years is how old I am.
Okay.
I lived several places till I moved to Wheelersburg after I got married to her.
Okay.
And I lived in Wheelersburg for a year, I think, while I was a kid.
Okay.
But,
I was.
and I was born in Wheelersburg. Actually born because my house was in Wheelersburg. My mom had me at home.
Oh, okay.
So I was born in Wheelersburg.
Well, I was born in Portsmouth. I lived in Wheelersburg all my life up till 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved out of Wheelersburg after our children graduated from high school.
Okay.
So, I'm pretty involved with the Wheelersburg community.
Okay, good, good. Was your family from this area?
Mine was.
Was your family from this
My
area?
mother graduated from Wheelersburg. My dad graduated from Portsmouth East.
Okay. So longtime Scioto Countyans.
Yes.
Okay. Was your family affected by the 1968 tornado?
My mother wasn't hurt, but it touched the house,
Okay.
the property she lived in. My first memory is I was coming through New Boston and I had left my children, two little boys, with her while I was out doing errands.
Mm-hmm.
And as I come through New Boston, it was a warm day and I had my windows down and the schools had let out early and the kids walking down the streets were talking and laughing about they got out of school because of tornado warnings. And of course they felt like it was a joke because they had never witnessed anything like that here. So when I got to my mother's house, it kind of concerned me. The school was letting out. I told her that she needed to be on watch because the children were being let out of school early because of this. So it must be a serious situation. So I went on home and we lived on Wilson Street in Sciotadale at the time. And I put my two little boys down for their nap and walked into the kitchen to do the dishes I had left from earlier. And I looked up and saw this big, dark thing coming up. And from there, it was coming up, looking like towards me, and it had all this debris in it. And then I thought, we had a little cellar. I better get the boys and get out there. And I stood there and watched it for a second longer, and it wasn't coming at me. So I thought, well, I'll just stand here and see. And finally, it went, Well, at that point, I realized it had probably gone past my mother's place on Hammerstein Road. And sure enough, we started hearing the sirens and all of this stuff. And my sister just lived up the street, and she was pretty newly married. She came to my house to do her washing. And so I met her outside, and she wasn't even aware of anything because we weren't getting anything. So I told her that I thought for sure that was a tornado I saw, and it was going towards Mother's house. And we were standing there thinking about, well, maybe we ought to go check. And she, just as we turned around and we were going to go get a car and get my kids and go, my mother and my brother came down the street, and they had the same thought. They came to check on us. So what happened with her was she went the electric went off, and she went to unplug a clock on her mantle, and she could see out the window down to the farm next to us. And she said there was that big cloud and twisting and blowing, and she saw the chicken house go up in it with all the chickens. So she ran and got my brother and the little dog, and they went to the basement. And she said the noise was horrific. They just thought the whole thing was falling in. Mm-hmm. But when it was all over, they had some damage, but nothing really serious, mm-hmm. except there was this big tree that was hundreds of years old in the front yard. It wasn't blown over. It was actually lifted up, twisted off, mm-hmm. and laid down. And so that was her experience. And then one of the ladies that was killed was my music teacher at school, Anna Lou Literal. I can't remember her last name, her married name. But she had come to her brother's house on Bell Hill so that she could get protected. Mm-hmm. And as she was going in the house, you've probably heard that story. She was hit by all the debris and everything, and it killed her. And of course, Dave's wife at that time had a broken back, and they had a small child who was all bruised up and banged, but he was okay. Yeah. And that's some of my memories of it, that it really destroyed a lot. Mm-hmm. And I saw it.
Yes.
And I wasn't touched by it, thank the Lord.
Yes. Yes.
From our house, she would have been looking just about directly south, and the storm was going east to west, mm-hmm. and it turned, of course, as it went through. So, and what I was doing is I worked road audit at the time. I was a project engineer, and I had a project up at Jackson, and I had been working all day, but for some reason, I went to Chillicothe, and so I came home over Rosemount, and when I got over Rosemount, up to then I didn't see a thing. Mm-hmm. When I got over Rosemount and started up through New Boston, I could see this huge yellow cloud, which I had never seen before, anything like it. And I could not imagine what was going on. And so I drove up the road and turned off on 140 to go up to our house on Souterdale, and I got a call on the radio, and they directed me to go to Hammerstein and Sheila Boulevard and stop traffic because the road was full of trees. And so I stopped at the house to see if Sandy was okay, and then I went on out, and I was out there till probably 11 o'clock or something like that. And they finally come and put a road closed sign up. Mm-hmm. And during my stay there, I was asked by a couple of guys if they would come, and if I would come down when I got off. They wanted to go searching for a lady that they thought was missing. Mm-hmm. She lived in Slaughterhouse Hall on Sheila Boulevard. And so it was probably 11:30 when I got over to where they were. I had to drive clear around. And so we took off. I think there was 4 or 5 of us. And we went up to where her house used to be. It was gone. And there was trash and garbage and, furniture and pieces of the house and foundation, dogs and chickens and cats, and all of them all beat up and bruised and cut up, and some of them could hardly walk. But we weren't interested in. We were looking very carefully for her. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what her name was, but I think it was Lucy something. She worked at Pop's restaurant as a cook, I think. Mm-hmm. And so we came clear almost over to where the little school used to be on the main drag up through Dogwood Ridge Road, probably 3/4 of a mile. And we were looking in a path that was really wide, but we never found her at all or anything else. After we got so far, we kept seeing trees and things, but not anything else. And so the next day, I found out that she was with her daughter in Columbus. Oh. And so that's the reason we didn't find her. Yeah. So she wasn't hers at all. But anyway, we were concerned about it because nobody had ever seen her or heard from her. So that was my first experience with the tornado, and was up till probably 2:30, 3 o'clock before I got home, and then I had to get the next morning go back to Jackson to work. And so after that, for the next few days, I went over and tried to help them clean the trees out of Slaughterhouse Hall there on Sheila Boulevard. And I think I worked over there like 3 or 4 evenings. It happened on a Tuesday, and so I worked there till Saturday. And when I went over there Saturday morning, the place was just too many people in there. So I left and went over to where the drive-in used to be. That's where Lowe's is at now. And so I went over to the drive-in and helped them clean up some trash over around in the drive-in. And then for the next 3 or 4 weeks on evenings and weekends, I spent helping put roofs on houses that were, the roofs were torn off and so on and so forth. And it's kind of funny because the guy that I went up and asked him, I said, "Are you putting on roofs?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I'll volunteer to do that." Well, he said, "Okay." And so I worked on like 5, 6, 7 roofs. I'm not really sure how many. It was just a bunch of them. And every time I turned around, I was going to another house, and there was like 6 or 7 of us on the crew, and we could put a roof on in a hurry. And so one day, after about 3 or 4 weeks, a kid asked me. He said, "How much are you getting paid?" I said, "Well, I volunteered. I'm not getting paid." He said, "Well, I am." I said, "Well, I'm going to quit because I'm taking somebody's job." I didn't know I was doing that. So the next day, I quit working, and by that time, everything was pretty cleaned up. And so that was my last days working on the cruise. So. But it was a holy mess, and I don't know if you know, but down where, right below Lowe's, there's a place called Reinhardt's and Lang's. Well, that's where they put all the debris from the tornado.
really?
That's all the debris. All that land in there was a swamp, and they filled that all in, and that's what made that capable of having the truck stop there.
Oh, okay.
So those are my major thoughts about the tornado. And I knew some of the guys. I know they were in that building where the Shapery used to be, and it blew right through there. And in fact, I think the tornado came almost right through where they put that debris. And I knew the 2 guys in there, but I just can't think of their names. But,
The 2 that were killed.
So it was a bad thing.
Now, they say the community really came together, the whole county. Did you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Did you experience that?
Yes, that's what I said. When I went over there on Saturday morning, I worked in the evenings. When I got home from work, I just went over there and volunteered to work and helped clean up the trees. I didn't have a saws, but I just went over and drug trees and put them in the trucks. But went over there Saturday morning, it was just a mob of people in there. And I think by Sunday evening, had that all cleared out, enough where you get cars through. And so I didn't go there anymore, like I said, and then I volunteered to put roofs on. So
That's amazing.
so we tried to help. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, it was the only person that I was real acquainted with that actually was in the tornado itself was Linda Piles. Her name is Purcell now, and her husband is my cousin. And I guess they were all pretty much at home when it went over through Countryside Village. And it destroyed a lot of places there. And they were, it was quite a traumatic thing for the neighborhood. And, you know, there's always been tornadoes, but there hadn't always been houses where they are.
Right.
So it was quite a thing, the way it come across the river and everything. But we're just thankful that so many people did get out of it, and there wasn't more deaths and injuries than what there was.
See, the tornado eventually crossed just beyond where Sandy's mother lived on Hammerstein Road there. And if you go on out to Dogwood Ridge, it went a little bit north of, or I guess it would be north of there, yeah. And I guess it tore down a telephone tower over there, or power tower. And it crossed over right across where, if you extended Hammerstein Road out, it would have crossed Hammerstein Road on out there. I mean, it went right across there. So it was pretty close to St. Luke Mom's house. Probably no more than a quarter mile.
It was really quite a shock to realize how quickly something like that can rip through and disrupt many lives like it did. But there was so much force in that one part of it that some of the boards and stuff that were sucked up in it when they landed had straw through them, like nails. The force of that wind had driven that straw into the wood. It was unreal.
Yeah. Amazing.
I think that's about all I got.
Okay. Wow. Very interesting. Yes, very interesting. Yes. And I think you pretty much covered anything that I was going to ask. You see, you guys just went right into it, you know.
Well, we were young at the time. I was like 28 or 29, something like that, when it happened, 29, I think. And so I had never even considered a tornado.
Right.
Now, we lived on Boehner Road in Sodaville, and we got a lot of odd storms that came through, and I had seen some with some, I remember one that had frogs raining on you. Yeah, we was always out playing in it. If it wasn't lightning, and we'd have frogs dropping down.
Yeah.
And that was hilarious.
I've heard that happen, yeah.
So, but never ever a windstorm like that, and it was just amazing to me that had happened in this part of the country, really.
Well, we had somebody mention that we have the mindset in this area that we're between these hills and that we're protected, but that's not necessarily so.
Well, no, that thing went right up over. I don't know if you know the area around here, but when you come through the Shapery across the old highway, old Route 52, and it went up to the old Willisburg Cemetery, went almost right over. My grandpa was buried up there. Went almost right over his grave. And it went right down and over in Slaughterhouse Hall and right up through that lady that lived there, late Lucy, went right up through the driveway to her house, and then right over to Logwood Ridge Road, and right over by Dogwood Road, it tore down like a 3-story house and blew off about the top 2 floors. So, but I mean, you know, and I looked that up I went on the internet and looked up, and they said it was an F5,
Yes.
which at that time was 261 miles an hour. And now it's only 200, I guess. In 2007 they changed it, but that's a heck of a speed. And
Yes, it is.
but then also they said there was a lot of argument because a lot of the houses that blew off weren't fastened down. So, but you know, I don't know that that's true or not true. But I guess if people inspected it, that they knew.
But they've left it as F5.
Yeah, right. And so
Ohio's first F5.
right, and it was a huge blast to this area, that's for sure. I mean,
Yes.
we remember it. I remember it very pointedly. That the things that happened and people and everybody just volunteered to try to help. I mean, there was people everywhere working.
That's wonderful.
Well, it got trapped down there in Slaughterhouse Hollow, and that's another problem. The hills do protect you to a certain degree from that, and a lot of them will glance off the hills and go on. But if they get in between the hills like that, then they really cause lots and lots of problems. So we're glad that we don't have many, and are hoping never to see another
Never
one.
again, right. I totally agree.
But you know, since then, I can tell you one thing: we do pay more attention when they have a tornado warning.
Yes.
Back then, if someone said tornadoes, we just kind of looked and said, "What do you mean tornado?
Right.
What's that?"
Right, yeah.
But nowadays, after that, we do pay
You listen,
attention.
yes.
Well, the children getting out of school were just laughing about it. They were just enjoying the fact they were getting out of school early. And so, you know, that's kind of the the whole idea we all had was. And I did warn my mother, and I'm glad I did, because she would have been totally unaware if I hadn't, because she wasn't listening to the radio or anything. So it just pays to kind of pay attention.
Yes,
Go with your gut feeling.
right.
This might not be some April Fool's joke. This might be real.
Yes.
So that's about all I can say.
That about it?
That's about it.
Okay. It wasn't too painful, was it?
No, no.
No.